Good morning. I'm Richard Stewart, and this is the second week for our class on communications where old and new communication strategies merge. So, let's get into the subject matter of the Survey Monkey and the results that you've given me. Some things that we came across in looking at the survey. There's a 3-point parish in rural Minnesota, and they're trying to form a communications team to see what kind of options are out there for them to be a part of their communities and how to attract folks to churches and also how to cross the distances that are involved. We want to have a better understanding of how to manage communications for the parish. Sometimes it seems to go run amok or it just does not get done. And there are a number of churches that are advertising on Christian radio stations. Not sure why or how they do this. I'm looking for resources to assist our church in getting a new communications ministry up and running and bring us into the 21st century. We want to learn how to work with different types of communications tools, technology, as well as paper, newspapers, newspaper articles. And I want to get over my fear of certain communications tools. One says fun, other information, looking for new ideas for those not using social media. Or perhaps even new ideas using old methods. How to reach members and others who still are paper mode people while others move into technology. All are interesting questions, and we'll try and address many of those right off the bat in the first week, or at least the second week. But later we'll get into a greater understanding of new tools available for communications to the faith community with both members and non-members, and some of the nuts and bolts of implementation. And every week I hope to improve the knowledge that's available, improving the way the church communicates and currently use a number of the social media technologies. We'll hit 7 of those particular things that became the most used in the process of today's lecture. We'll also look into some of the boundaries of social media. We'll do that toward the end. Things like how many pictures of people do you put up, and especially what do you do with pictures of children? And how do you either secure those elements or make them available only to your congregation? Exposure. Well, being familiar with the various means of communications and some of the guidelines and directions on their usage are important elements for every congregation as they move into the process of moving ahead. But some of the basics that are always going to be there are some of the basics I learned early in my collegiate career of journalism. You want to know who, what, when, where, why, and how. And those tools don't change no matter what the media. You need to have some goals. What are your goals? And how do you want to get to those goals? And the last part, and it's always the toughest part for me, is how to evaluate what you've done. So, let's kind of get into what SurveyMonkey did tell us. A greater understanding of the new tools available are always there, and how you hope to learn about those frequently elements. But what did we learn from that survey? Well, there's some things that we really happened this week during the midst of the survey. This is the 25th anniversary of the World Wide Web. But in line with that, no matter what happens as you build upon the elements that are available to you, you do know what your mission is, who your audience is, whether it's a targeted audience or it's a general audience, and then picking the best tool for the process. And like that 3-point parish, yes, you do need a plan. Sometimes we do it on the spur of the moment and it sort of falls into place, and sometimes we're lucky. And sometimes it just never happens at all because no one can get the energy to put a plan in place and then to make it work. Communications, audits are all time well spent. And it's probably the hardest thing for me to do because I don't like going back and looking at my stuff. But it still needs to be done. We ought not forget the role of the telephone. As you read through the elements in Speaking Faith, you probably were wondering, why are we going back to the telephone? because it's still the primary means of communication in many of our congregations. I think I had 3 phone calls before I got to the class today. So it's still an element of communications, and it is a social media. No matter how we look at it in the past, it still is a tool for the future. So what does that say about telephone etiquette and machine versus people? Do you have a machine, especially in small parishes, and what do you say? Early in my career in a campus ministry location, I worked with a Catholic priest, and Tom was really outgoing. And he would always come in and change the tape on a daily basis. I still remember picking up the phone call, trying to answer the phone, at least once or twice a week when someone said, "Oh, I didn't really want to talk to anyone, I just wanted to hear what the message was for today." Because he would give sometimes a prayer, sometimes he would give the ball score, sometimes he would talk about the weather, he would talk about his family, he would talk about stuff on campus. And he all did it all in 60 seconds that we had on the tape. And he was good at it. So in one sense, telephone etiquette is still one of those elements of social presence and social communication that still has valuable in essence in today's society. So, voicemail, most of us have it now. It's either on our cell phones or we have it on a machine in our offices. Texting. As much as I have really fat fingers and don't like to text, I'm finding it increasingly a way not to be interrupted in the context of something else. Sometimes you don't want to answer the telephone right then and there because you're talking with someone else or communicating with someone else in another way, and you don't want to break the train of thought. But if someone texts you, it's still sitting there and it's right there and it's readily available as soon as you do have time. My son has taught me that pretty quickly, that I can't always interrupt him with a telephone call, but he can text me back. So we have to really balance off the immediacy and the time elements that are involved in our communications materials and the way in which we go about using it. Paper, electrons, doesn't matter which one we're using. We still need to do editing. That's why I talk about my fat fingers. It seems like I'm always hitting the return key and going back and correcting stuff I typed in error. And I'm really not real good yet at the acronyms and the shorthand that's available in texting. Constantly, we need to do feedback. That means we need to listen to those English teachers in our congregation who always want to correct us on our newsletters and our bulletin errors. Sometimes when we're trying to do something, we're too close to the materials. So we need to be able to do things in a timely fashion so that we can stop, let it rest, go back, and then look at it one more time. You've even probably caught a couple of my errors in my typing on materials on Moodle. But use that feedback. And if someone has a question, as you've already been doing on the Moodle site, you've given me feedback about things that did not work or things that I put in an error or a button that I did not click in making it available to you. I need to hear your feedback. But then you need to hear the feedback from your congregations. Yes, we still need to use news outlets, paper and electronic media. We need to know what their deadlines are. What are their search patterns? What are the things that they are interested in? And sometimes a radio station or a television station will give a kind of a news junkie's approach to how it is they work and what it is they look for. You don't want to call them at 5:30 with a story that you want to have here at 6:30. That just doesn't work anymore. And newspapers like a 2 or 3 day deadline on news items that go even in their announcement section, let alone a news story. I've even had newspapers call me when we've seen an obituary and say, is there more to this person because it sounds like an interesting person? And then they'll go back and do some more digging if you get it to them in time. And as you looked in the book, I think somewhere like chapters 5 or 6, there was an awful lot about photographic integrity. Our graphics are equally one of those elements that we need to pay careful attention to. As you looked at the pictures in the book, you saw that Budweiser sign in the back of a group photo. Not necessarily you want something on your Facebook web page for your congregation. Or the graphic integrity of colors. Even the colors that I'm using for this presentation, this orange and kind of white, and the black. Sometimes, especially some men, have different difficulty with some color blindness, and so color choices and selection are an extremely important element. I'm not certain if somebody who's colorblind sees the red check mark you'll see on the next few slides, because it's on an orange background. It may appear brown, it may appear black. I'm not colorblind, so I'm not certain how it appears to them. But if someone tells you they didn't see it, or they couldn't see it, or they had a difficult time seeing it, pay attention to their comments. And even though everybody now carries a telephone that has a camera in it, everybody is not a photographer. So, screen your photos, look at them carefully, and make sure that it's really something you do want to publish. Make sure things are easy on the eye. Color type, colors, type size, type frames, type styles are all important for the eyes, especially of those of us who are getting older. I'm paying much more attention to it now than I used to. When we looked at the elements of things that congregations are already doing, newspapers, newsletters, bulletin announcements, bulk mail, radio announcements, television announcements, and telephone calls, it was not surprising that 100% of the congregations who were represented in this class used bulletin announcements. 94% used newsletters. 56% or 52% used telephone calls to contact their congregation. 31% still use newspapers in some way, shape, manner, or form. And 31% use bulk mail. That has probably gone down a lot as the postal costs have gone up. None of you use radio announcements, and some of you do use television announcements. All are important elements as we move forward, and the ones with the red check mark we'll go through as we can today. Who does the communications? Well, 87% of you say that the office manager or secretary is the responsible person, and then 68%, almost 70%, say that it's the responsibility of the pastor. And then there, surprisingly for me, was that multiple people do it for 56% of the congregations, which means you're already sharing the responsibility and putting it out there for other people to handle. So it's not just the pastor or the office manager's responsibility. It's not a staff responsibility. And again, we'll try and look at both the office manager and the pastor as elements in that. And I'll probably use myself as an example of doing that. Surprisingly enough, 81% both use both email to all and congregational website. Audio taping of services is less than 50%. Facebook posting is 75%. And then 6.2 use a congregational or pastoral blog. No one does tweets to congregations. I must admit, I'm not ready to have someone tweet me in the midst of a sermon and ask me a question about it. I think I would probably fall out of the pulpit. When it comes to knowing the content of particular words that are involved in social media, I was surprised that 56% of you do know what a Dropbox is. I was not surprised that 68, almost 70% of you use Facebook. 56% using Dropbox is a lot, because that means it's been a methodology that has been attractive to a number of people for a lot of reasons. And if you don't know what it is, as the person who was in the class on Saturday morning did not know, we'll go back and look at it just a little bit. Some of the other elements we'll talk about at least a little bit more in ensuing weeks, but these are the two that I'm going to try and address right now this week. 50% of you know what friending is, 50% of you know what posting is, and the rest of it was much smaller in terms of LinkedIn, Foursquare, hashtags, MySpace, news feeds. and we'll get into those a bit more detail later, and that'll kind of address the issue as to what it is and how we go about using it. 75% of you do know what search is and you've used it, but I was surprised that 18% of you do not know what search is. That means that you're either really far away from a computer or you haven't had a question yet. Somehow I sincerely doubt that, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And as we get into the last part of that alphabet, 50% of you know what YouTube is, or 60% know what YouTube is and use it, and 50% of you use Yahoo. And that's because it's really a much broader piece than just one side or another. It's multiple tools all wrapped up into one name. So, Dropbox. Dropbox is a methodology where you can have a central file cabinet for a number of people. Particularly, it is used in a number of places that I'm involved with, like the Candidacy Committee for Upstate New York. We have a Dropbox that is used by almost everyone on the committee, and they have it as a way in which they then send out bulk emails to their Dropbox address, and we can put all of our stuff in that Dropbox and get it from any computer, any phone, any tablet, and edit those docs automatically. They can have photos, they can show off videos anywhere, which means that I can have all my candidacy stuff in my candidacy Dropbox. So I don't have to find it in my email and search it out and wonder whether or not I received it or did I accidentally delete it. It's all in one place at one time. It talks about being shared with confidence, so that you can share photos with friends, work with a team like you're using a single computer, and everything automatically is private. So you control who sees what. The address is www.dropbox.com, and it's a place that some of us are even considering for our church council, not only the minutes but the kind of notices that we send out, because my inbox has gotten very large from just communications that is council related in the interim that I'm serving right now. So it's one of the things on my agenda at this point. One of the other elements was Facebook. Now this is kind of interesting because it didn't occur to me to think that people don't know what Facebook is. But at the same time, this Sunday I used that example in the context of a piece of my sermon. And surprisingly enough, I was surprised at how many people had no clue as to what Facebook was, especially in the 8 o'clock service, which is primarily older. As I'm looking at Facebook in terms of a congregation, and that's why I went to the congregational website for Upper Darby where I'm doing my interim, there are some things about that site which make it kind of uniquely interesting. One is that there are some things about a Facebook site that make it a little different than a Facebook site for a person. Number one, you cannot become a friend of your congregation. You can like it, and you can hear about it once you are in a like position. You can have events advertised, videos advertised, photos advertised, and it talks about what the congregation is. But the administrator of the website for Facebook for a congregation or an organization needs to be a member of Facebook and have a Facebook account. So the office manager who manages our website is not a member of Facebook. And also, since she's the manager of the website and the office manager for 15 years, she was not interested in anything to her portfolio of things that are called her responsibilities. So I took on the task of finding the website. Ironically enough, there was one already there for the congregation. Part of that is done by the administration of Facebook, which goes out and looks for businesses in your geographical area. So there may be a Facebook site already in place for your congregation, which you can take over. So as we go through that process of looking at the website for Christ Lutheran Church in Upper Darby, all of these photos have been placed on since I've been the interim, this is an old photograph that was in the congregation, probably in a large form, about 14 by whatever, and I took a picture of a picture, and that became part of the cover elements. Since we're in the midst of Lent, the profile picture changes with some degree to the seasons and the activities going on in the church. And since we do have Stations of the Cross in the congregation, I'm also advertising the fact that the Stations of the Cross are there, and they can be visited on your own with a self-guided tour, which makes it even easier for congregants and other members of the community just to come in, walk the Stations of the Cross with the guided book, and do it on their own. Particularly, we're focusing on Fridays, but if you ring the doorbell and ask to come in, you can do it almost any day of the week. This is also a place where I've posted the sermons that I've been preaching at the congregation. And we'll get into the details of these later on during this content of this course. We'll talk about where the audio is, how the audio is done, and where it's stored and how it's done. But at the same time, since most of my sermons are written out, that's not saying I follow them to the T or pronounce every word correctly, or I don't go off on tangents. The text is there as well so that they can listen and follow along, and they can see sometimes where I diverge. But at the same time, there's also places where you can talk about announcements of things that are going on in the life of the congregation. So we can talk about our midweek Lenten services, and they seem to have disappeared. We can talk about the Stations of the Cross. We can talk about elements that are coming up in terms of meetings of the church, which may say more about me not being able to post things in a timely fashion than anything else. But that is also posting, which is one of those elements that we were talking about in the context of the 7 most used pieces that we have on our list. But friending, on the other hand, is something that you do in Facebook with people. And so we'll go back to my own particular site. And once you become a friend of someone, then obviously that is the place where you become friending. So you have friends, they have friends, and when you do it between one another, then you are friending one another. And I've probably got more requests than I have ever decided to ever follow through on. But it's a good place to look at where you can trade messages. I know who my friends are who are online currently. I have a list of people who are sending me, are making messages available to me. I also have a message portfolio, and I can also then respond to friend requests which come up under the 3rd category. All of which are a part of one program called Facebook. Now, search. Search is kind of an interesting one, especially for those who said that they'd never heard of it or didn't know how to use it. It's on every web-based portal site. Doesn't matter whether it's Bing, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Google, Yahoo. They all have a line where you can search. And every one of them has multiple search engines. Google is probably the most famous one of them all because it says very clearly it's become an element in the English language. People talk about, well, I Googled it, which meant they searched for it. Yahoo is also a search engine, and we'll go into Yahoo just a little bit later and find out how much broader it is. Amazon, though it is a commercial site which then talks about the selling of products for the primary elements, it is also a search engine because Google is becoming a warehouse for other vendors. And so if you're looking for an item or a piece or a product, they will be able to help you find it and then point you to the marketer who has it available for you. Likewise, eBay is a similar kind of function. because they sell a lot of stuff, they're also then a purveyor of information of how to go get it. And believe it or not, McAfee's is also a search tool. One is it searches for secure things, and it will also then tell you if a site that you want to go to is insecure. In other words, it spots those places which are fishing for your information. Twitter, that involves tweeting, and that's also a special item where people have to belong to the process. We'll talk about that one much later. And Wikipedia is the online encyclopedia. Obviously, if it's an encyclopedia, it's a search engine, because it means that you can go out and find subject matters, and also then once you're inside the elements of the encyclopedia, it will point you to other things, so that if you talk about airplane, it will refer you to Wright Brothers. But then you can click on Wright Brothers and you go back and find out that they were Dayton bicycle makers. Then you can click on bicycle and find out where the history of the bicycle came from. In other words, it's one of those online encyclopedias where you can get lost forever and spend an inordinate amount of time just doing searching. And then there are other search engines beyond that that are always seem to be popping up. And you can manage which one of these you want to be your primary search engine. I'm surprised I don't have ask.com in here or a couple of others. But that's my choice, not yours. Ah, yes, YouTube. YouTube is a fun place to go because it's a place where people store their video elements. Almost everybody who has a cell phone camera has a video camera. And so they store their stuff on their channels. And yes, I have a channel. And one of the things that's on the channel is the opening session that we had here for Congregation's Old and New Ministry Strategies to Merge, and how to get on to Moodle, the introduction to Moodle. This past summer, the congregation put a new stove on the second floor in the commercial kitchen, and it was an element to show within the congregation what was going on. So it went on Facebook as a video. I was been the servant to your volunteer chaplain for a number of years, and they were having a piñata birthday party. And so we took pictures of people trying to, well, actually the videos of people trying to break the piñata. And then it was finally done. This past spring, I attended an ordination service for the last of my team candidates at the Florida Bahamas Synod. And so I took videos of Bruce Edwards being ordained, or at least the reception of his congregation into membership in the Florida Synod. I have a niece who is a roller derby girl. So while we were in Florida, we got to see Erin go brawl, my niece, as she skated. And last Sunday after Easter service is called Holy Humor at Christ Upper Darby. And obviously we took some pictures of that as well. Old friend on a trip to Hong Kong, I videotaped his jazz music for about an hour in Hong Kong at the Foreign Correspondence Club. So that's my channel. Not very big, not very deep, but it is my YouTube channel. So you can post videos, long time, short time. This is only 33 seconds. This is 6 minutes and 12 seconds. But the jazz music is quite lengthy, 30 minutes, 32 minutes, and one short 7-minute set. So you can, depending upon how you set your account up, you can have either short videos or long videos. I have both. And then Yahoo, the one that I wanted to make sure that it was last. Yahoo is more than just a search engine, which is one way people talk about it. It is also a mail delivery system, because a number of people have their accounts at yahoo.com. It's also a news service, a sports service, a finance service. It is a full service place for internet activity, because it can also be your home page if you so desire. So it has all the elements that has Firefox does, or Internet Explorer has, or any of the browsers that we talk about on a daily basis. So it's a multi-service organization, and one of the ways in which we have competition in the marketplace. So those are the elements that you talked about in the context of looking at who you are and what you are, and the things that you know about at this point. If you have some questions about the elements of this, please add them at the future, and we'll try and look at them as we go along through the course of this week. But I'm hoping that you will find this post helpful to you, and if you have any questions, please write me, Richard N. Stewart at Verizon.net, or the shorthand is click instructor on the Moodle site and you'll get me as well. rstewart at ltsp.edu. Thanks very much. Type to you later. Bye now.